Struggling single mom rests on billionaire's shoulder. What happens next will leave you inspired. As the shadow of the diner faded behind her, Sarah stumbled upon a world she had long forgotten. Lifting her gaze from well-worn sneakers to twinkling lights and laughter, she walked straight into a gala hosted by none other than David Hayes, a billionaire known for his magnificence. It felt surreal. She stood in worn clothes, the weight of overdue bills pulling her down like anchors. "What are you doing here?" she thought, her thoughts racing as the warm chatter engulfed her. She longed for the shimmering promise of hope that only her bright-eyed daughter Lily seemed capable of seeing. But with every click of her heels against the polished floor, that promise felt more distant. Could she really rebuild her late husband's construction business while searching for the hope she needed? In that moment of mingling laughter, David caught her eye, an inviting smile stretching across his dapper face. She fought the urge to dissolve into the bustling crowd, dragging the ghosts of trepidation and self-doubt with her. But as he approached, the magnetism of his presence shushed her racing heart, threading warmth through the chill of isolation. She found herself sharing pieces of her reality, struggles that lingered like fog on a winter's morning, dreams that floated just out of reach, slipping further as she grappled with the fear of failure. Sarah was tired, deeply exhausted, yet here was a man whose eyes reflected understanding. With surprising gentleness, he suggested mentoring her, a lifeline tossed into turbulent waters. An opportunity to lift her late husband's legacy and breathe life back into it. Yet an inkling of guilt weighed heavily on her conscience. How could she accept help from someone like him? Friends she called allies now lurked in shadows, their faith in her wavering as she climbed a mountain she no longer knew how to ascend. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Days turned into nights as they worked together, his insight providing a roadmap to the future she desperately sought. But like weeds multiplying without care, community whispers began to sprout. Friends that once filled her home with laughter now looked through her like she'd vanished from their memories. A flurry of unease turned into a deluge of fear. Was she selling the fabric of family for a momentary chance at success? Her heart wrestled with ambition, but loyalty cut deep like splintering wood. Just when she gathered the strength to face the world anew, a scandal erupted, launching her into a fierce twist of searing betrayal. As accusations marred her credibility, she felt the ground shift beneath her. Would the very foundation she sought to build up crumble under the weight of judgment? Torn between family loyalty and newfound, potentially transcendent connections, Sarah stood at a precipice, poised to either fall or soar. Her pulse quickened with visceral urgency. She had to prepare for the pitch of a lifetime, but doubt clung stubbornly, suffocating her resolve. What if everything she built alongside David collapsed before her? Could the fragile hope she possessed withstand the storm of spite? The path to restoration flickered dimly as shadows loomed large, reminding her that at any moment all could unravel. As she approached the judgmental gaze of the room, everything hung in the balance. She could either forge her mother's legacy anew or watch it become dust. With a single glance at David's unwavering support, she took a breath, knowing the storm that approached could tear everything apart. Sarah stood on the threshold of transformation, the weight of her decision coiling tightly around her heart. This pitch wasn't merely a presentation, it was the culmination of months of self-discovery, masterfully interwoven strands of ambition and fear. Her eyes met David's, a flicker of reassurance radiating from him that ignited a spark of determination within her. She had to channel that into her voice, had to confront the impending judgment with an authenticity she had nearly forgotten. As she moved forward, the murmurs surrounding her felt less like a storm and more like whirling leaves caught in the dance of autumn. Composure settled over her like a familiar blanket. She could speak to the heart of the committee gathered before her, could reclaim the legacy of her late husband, the vision he nurtured, an endeavor she wished to elevate. With each step, she wrestled with a swirl of percussion, her pulse, her breaths, her growing sense of purpose. The room was grand but suffocating. Chandeliers hung like trophies of wealth above glistening tables, and expectant faces peered at her with both curiosity and skepticism. She paused, absorbing the energy radiating from the crowd. Behind those polished smiles lurked judgment. They were assessing her not just as an entrepreneur, but as a person, a mother, a woman clinging to the fragments of her past. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice firm yet gentle. "Thank you for allowing me to share my vision for the future of Parker Construction." It felt surreal speaking aloud, challenging the very core of her doubts. She took a breath, allowing the prepared words to flow from her like a river, guided by passion rather than anxiety. "For years, my husband dedicated himself to creating not just buildings, but homes. I stand before you to revive his legacy, to build a future that reflects our unity and ambition." But deep inside, doubt clawed at the edges of her mind. Those sentiments whispered, painting her fears in vivid strokes, taunting her with visions of failure and shame. "What if they laugh?" a voice hissed. "What if they see you as nothing more than a grieving widow?" Each sentence she shared was a step across shifting sands, her equilibrium challenged with every passing gaze. She glanced at David. His stoic demeanor ignited her resolve anew, fortifying the bridge she'd crossed from vulnerability to strength. As she delved deeper into her presentation, she tucked away the insecurities, her past, the judgments, the whispers. The room began to morph around her. The walls of uncertainty that once towered over her now seemed to lean in, enveloping her in camaraderie. She talked about innovation, her ideas flowing seamlessly, building a vision infused with sustainable practices and community collaboration. Concepts that had once seemed out of reach now grounded in her every word. The energy shifted. Whispers transitioned into contemplative nods. She wasn't just speaking, she was igniting a spark of interest, perhaps even admiration. But just as buoyancy filled her, a sudden interruption sent ripples of unease throughout the room. A rival business owner, recognized for their cutthroat approach, spoke up, their voice saturated with scorn. "What makes you think you can lead without your husband's guidance? Your emotions won't win you contracts, Sarah." The room turned tense, the air thick with implications. Her heart raced erratically. She felt the walls inching in once more. But this time, there was a new flicker of determination. She had faced storms before, had navigated loneliness and doubt. This was just one more challenge, one more battleground to conquer. "I may not have my husband's guidance," she replied, chin tilted defiantly, "but I carry his vision with me. It drives me every day. It's not about winning contracts. It's about creating something meaningful for our community, for my daughter. That's worth fighting for." In that moment, Sarah understood. The storm couldn't wash away her strength. It could only reveal it. With resolve radiating from the core of her being, she braced for the onslaught of any further challenges. The tides were shifting, and she would not cower. How far could she really go? Would her courage be enough to withstand the waves of scrutiny? As she stood in the spotlight, Sarah felt the bittersweet pang of unresolved conflict. The battle for herself was just beginning. The silence in the room was deafening, pregnant with the weight of Sarah's words. The assembly that had moments ago spewed doubt and disbelief now stood poised at an intersection of uncertainty, Her strength forged from grief had made them question their own preconceptions. But just as she felt the ground solidify beneath her, another ripple of uncertainty threatened to pull her into familiar depths. The rival's contemptuous gaze lingered, lending an uncomfortable gravity to the moment. "Emotions don't seal deals," he reiterated, his sneer as pointed as a dagger. It was a challenge that clawed at her courage, but mixing into her confusion was the flicker of something more profound, an awareness of her identity beyond the roles defined by the loss of her husband. "Perhaps not alone," she responded, voice steadying, "but emotion is the foundation on which we build trust, and trust is the currency of any successful enterprise." Her words somehow ignited a small spark in the group, a few heads nodding, a slight relaxation in the once judgmental postures. As she concluded her presentation with her vision of community-centered projects, her pulse began to match the rhythm of the room's emerging energy. The intensity of her passion was met with murmurs of interest, their skepticism slowly morphing into contemplation. This was a turning point, a moment where she could redefine not just her legacy, but her entire narrative. Afterward, as the members filed out, many approached her, offering genuine encouragement and questions that delved deeper into her plans. Their seemingly genuine interest, however, jolted her into a renewed awareness of disbelief buried beneath her bravado. Was it truly transformation, or merely the optics of a moment? She reveled in the fleeting euphoria, but the shadows of doubt still loomed. David caught up with her near the exit, his expression mirroring pride and concern. "You were incredible, Sarah. I could see the shift. They were invested," he remarked, a hint of admiration lacing his voice. "Yeah, but what happens when the initial buzz fades? I can't ride this wave of momentum if it's built on fleeting impressions. I need to sustain this," she replied, her brow furrowing in contemplation. His brow creased as he studied her intensely. "You have the vision, but it also requires strategic planning. You need to build a strong framework to back your passion. Just being the grieving widow won't be enough." The truth of his words hung heavy in the air, whipping through her like a chilling wind. She had devoted herself to the emotional aspect of her mission, but now it was crystal clear. Harnessing that emotion into action was imperative. Failure to do so would turn her articulation into mere rhetoric. As Sarah returned home, the bustle of the city began to draw her in. The suffocating walls surrounding her were gradually replaced by the sound of life outside. She pictured her husband standing behind her, supportive, yet her battle was no longer his, it was hers. The rush of determination coursed through her veins, igniting a strategy in her mind. Formalizing her business plan, identifying potential partnerships, and mapping out a robust funding strategy without compromising her values. That night, with her daughter nestled asleep, Sarah took to her laptop, her fingers dancing over the keys with an urgency born of newfound clarity. As the words formed on the screen, a sense of purpose ignited within her, one that allowed her to inscribe the legacy she wanted, not one left behind, but one of her creation. But even in this moment of assertive clarity, the specter of that rival's smirk loomed, whispering doubts about how far she could stretch her capabilities. In that quiet night, as she pored over projections and design ideas, she recognized that conquering the business world would mean confronting not just external challenges, but also the fears lurking within. What she didn't yet realize was that the real trials were just on the horizon. The challenges that would confront her determination, ambitions, and resolve loomed closer, requiring not just professional acumen, but a reckoning of her very self. The time had come for her to confront not just the market, but her inner determination. An awakening was brewing, and strength would be demanded at every turn. What unforeseen obstacles lay ahead, waiting to test her newfound resolve? Night melted into day, the sunlight pouring through Sarah's kitchen window, illuminating the clutter of her recent endeavors. Coffee brewed, steam curling upward as she stared at her laptop. Each word she had typed last night felt like a small step toward a destination she was unsure even existed. The adrenaline that had urged her fingers to dance across the keyboard had morphed into a nagging doubt, punctuating the quiet morning with the questions that danced just beneath her surface. She sat back, crossing her arms, the intensity in her chest rising like a tide. Could she really craft a business out of her vision? Could she transform her grief into something tangible and lucrative without losing herself in the process? Answering those questions required more than just bravado. It called for an examination of her deepest fears. In that moment of reflection, she caught her daughter's laughter echoing from the playroom, reminding her of why she was striving for this change. Yet even the joy of motherhood was tinged with an unexpected weight. What legacy would she be leaving for her daughter? The lingering specter of self-doubt mixed with the urgency to succeed, creating an internal battlefield that felt impossible to navigate. The morning passed with her oscillating between productivity and paralysis. Chasing shadows of ideas led her to collect market research on potential competitors, but with every name she entered, the feeling of inadequacy swelled within her. She encountered an array of successful entrepreneurs who had built their dreams from the ground up. Their images painted in stark contrast to her own wavering sense of purpose. Would they welcome her into this space, or would they see her as merely another casualty of personal tragedy? Taking risk into account, Sarah began jostling through her notes. Each point of her business plan required a firm foundation of knowledge, not just intuition. She recognized that mentorship could be pivotal. Reaching out to former business associates of her late husband, she could gather insights and maybe even glean support. But the prospect of attending those networking events filled her with trepidation. What would she say to seasoned professionals when her heart still bore the scars of a recently lost love? Would they see the widow who couldn't move on, or a determined entrepreneur ready to innovate? In a moment of clarity, she shut her laptop, allowing the rush of thoughts to simmer. She understood that her fear of judgment was just that, fear. It held weight only if she allowed it to define her actions. That was the crux of it. Contemplating this revelation bloomed a sense of urgency within her. The labyrinth of doubt she faced was not just external, it was intertwined with the way she perceived herself. The following days blended into a rhythm of searching for resources and identity reconstruction. Instinctively, Sarah began penning not just business ideas, but affirmations of her capabilities. Each repetitive act steadily fortified her resolve, shifting attention outward as she sought to connect with her community. She explored local resources, events, and participatory workshops meant to bridge experience and ambition. Learning was an easy escape, allowing her to immerse herself without directly confronting the discomfort of her circumstances. One afternoon, fueled by a surge of confidence, she registered for a local entrepreneurship summit. Sheepishly, she filled out the application, nervous yet invigorated. As she clicked submit, the weight of that small act unfurled in her chest. The prospect of stepping into a room filled with potential allies was exhilarating. But the shadows that danced at the edges of her excitement represented lingering insecurities. Yet what she didn't yet realize was that her confrontation with self-doubt would demand more than superficial acts of courage. This was merely the beginning of her transformation. As she prepared for the event, each choice echoed in her mind, reverberating with the echoes of her past and aiming toward a future yet to be pinned. The horizon of opportunity loomed ahead, but would the specter of her prior life hold her back just as she began to sprint forward? Before that summit, she would delve into untapped strengths and revelations within herself that might change everything. Would she embrace this path with authenticity, or would the resistance of her lingering doubts prove too strong? Facing the elusive answers was a challenge she could not ignore. The morning of the Entrepreneurship Summit dawned with a sense of surreal anticipation. Sarah woke earlier than usual, the rhythmic chirping of birds outside her window compounding her restlessness. She stood in front of her closet, the weight of indecision hanging heavy in the air. What to wear? What represented the entrepreneur she aspired to be? Her fingers grazed through her few options, but nothing felt right. Each outfit felt like a costume, a facade hiding the true self she grappled with beneath the surface. As she settled on a simple yet tailored outfit, she caught sight of her reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back seemed both familiar and foreign, a strange blend of widow and warrior. There was a flicker of determination in her eyes, yet the depth of lingering heartache clung at the edges. She pulled back her shoulders, resolved to merge those two parts of herself. Today, she would not shy away from the scars that shaped her identity. The drive to the venue was fraught with a whirlwind of thoughts. She replayed her carefully constructed elevator pitch in her mind, battling a torrent of self-doubt. What if she stumbled over her words? What if her ideas fell flat? Each question crashed against her resolve like waves wearing down stone. But somewhere amidst that turmoil, a flicker of resilience ignited. She had fought tooth and nail for her daughter, and now it was time to fight for her dreams. Upon arriving, the atmosphere buzzed with energy, and the faint aroma of fresh coffee wafted through the air. Sarah stepped into the hall, her heart thrumming like a bass drum. Groups of entrepreneurs mingled, their laughter and animated discussions engulfing her. Swallowing hard, she reminded herself that everyone here had once been a stranger in the same position. As she made her way through the crowd, she stumbled upon an old colleague of her late husband. Tim had always exuded confidence, the kind that could fill a room. When he recognized her, his wide smile and warm embrace initiated an unexpected rush of comfort. "How are you holding up, Sarah?" he asked, genuine concern lacing his tone. "I'm finding my way," she replied, the answer feeling genuine for the first time. Tim introduced her to several other attendees, weaving her into conversations about disruptive ideas and market challenges. Each shared story, from triumphs to pitfalls, began to dissolve Sarah's apprehension. She realized that these individuals faced their own insecurities and fears. They too bore untold stories in their hearts. With every exchanged word, Sarah felt a vital piece of her confidence click into place. She spoke about her vision, a tentative concept at first, but as she articulated her goals, her words found strength. The validation from peers reshaped her perspective, pushing against the internal barriers erected by doubt. As she navigated her experiences, discussions sparked new ideas. What if she created a platform for support, a network that amalgamated shared stories and encouraged budding entrepreneurs like herself? A fire ignited within her, fueling a clearer vision. By the time the event transitioned into small workshops, she understood her purpose was not merely to seek endorsement for her vision, but to build a community that would thrive on shared experiences. Yet, as the day progressed, the tension inside her ebbed and flowed. She was building a network, yes, but she was also confronting stark realities. Each connection reminded her of what she had lost and what she was striving to achieve, making her question if she could stand firmly on her own. Stepping away from a group, she took a moment alone at the edge of the bustling room, allowing the noise to muffle her doubts. Here was her pivotal moment. She could alter the narrative that no longer served her. But to do so, she had to embrace her future with clarity and commitment. Returning to the crowd, she realized she was no longer just a widow or a mother fighting to redefine herself. She was an entrepreneur. Entrepreneur, ready to be forged in the crucible of her experiences. That night, she would return home to draft an entirely new business plan, not just for the numbers, but for passion and purpose. As she left the summit, exhilaration flooded her veins, but an unsettling thought lingered. What if the connections made today evaporated in the face of her insecurities? Tomorrow would demand even more courage, more confrontation with the doubts that still shadowed her. The challenge loomed large: to translate her newfound insights into actionable steps. Would she find the confidence to forge ahead, or would she retreat back into the shadows of her former self? The morning after the summit, the dawn light felt different to Sarah. It seeped through her window with a gentler touch, as if promising new opportunities. She brewed a strong cup of coffee, perched at her kitchen table, and pulled out her notebook, her heart racing with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The notes she had jotted down during the workshops seemed to pulse with potential. She flipped through pages filled with ideas, but one stood out, the framework for that support platform she envisioned. But as she started to articulate a plan, a wave of doubt washed over her. What if her idea was too ambitious? What if she misread the market entirely? The internal questions started to form barriers. They felt like concrete blocks pressing down on her resolve. Brushing a hand through her hair, she exhaled sharply, recognizing this familiar pattern of self-sabotage. Determined to combat these uncertainties, she set her intentions. She would devote an hour each day, just herself and her ideas. She approached the day with movement and action instead of indecision. She opened her laptop and began drafting her business plan. Step by step, she transformed abstract concepts into concrete goals. Aiming for a balance between practicality and vision, she mapped out the community's purpose, services, and how it would foster connections among aspiring entrepreneurs. As she wrote, her clarity expanded, allowing threads of creativity to weave into her thoughts. After several hours of focused work, Sarah sat back, studying the blueprint. Yet there was still something gnawing at her. Could she really execute this alone? The question felt like a looming shadow over her bright ideas. It wasn't simply about crafting a supportive network, it was about leading it. Leadership demanded confidence, an attribute she still felt eluded her. Pushing thoughts of inadequacy aside, she picked up her phone and dialed Tim. He answered on the first ring, his voice streaming warmth almost instantly. She couldn't help but recall his confidence shining through their brief interactions yesterday. "Hey, Tim, I need your advice," she said, jumping straight into the gravity of the discussion. Their conversation flowed effortlessly. She shared her idea for the entrepreneurial platform, and his enthusiasm was palpable even through the phone. "Sounds fantastic, Sarah. You've got a vision that can empower so many people," he said. "But you might want to consider forming a small advisory team. It could bolster your credibility and lighten your load." The suggestion reverberated through her. It was a pivotal turn. She'd been wrestling with the idea of pursuing this venture alone, but now it felt like an opportunity rather than a burden. Engaging others would not only build her business, but also forge connections that could help her grow personally. After ending the call, her thoughts raced. Who could she engage? Who would resonate with her mission? The names of potential advisors swirled in her mind, but one caught her attention. Jess, a former colleague of her late husband, known for her savvy skills in marketing and community outreach. Jess had made a name for herself in the tech industry and always had a keen sense of authenticity. The following days unfolded with Sarah weaving her plans while fostering her newfound connections. She reached out to Jess, who expressed smooth excitement about joining the team. Their discussion sparked ideas that infused new life into Sarah's vision, layering in strategic elements she hadn't considered before. Each conversation further buoyed her confidence, but as she challenged herself to solidify this network, vulnerability crept in. She began to question herself again. Is this really what I am meant to be doing? What if I falter under the responsibility? The familiar insidious doubts loomed, urging her to second guess. The more she built, the greater the stakes became. In moments of quiet at home, she found herself staring out of the window, grappling with these fears. The process of taking action and embracing uncertainty was proving more intricate than anticipated. Yet amidst this chaos, she acknowledged a truth. Her experiences molded her resilience. Her journey was not about escaping failure, but rather about embracing it. She decided then to confront the vulnerability, to speak about her fears openly. It was during a brainstorming session with Jess that she took a leap, revealing her doubts about leadership and her capacity to manage this project. The emotional weight lifted as Jess listened intently, offering her validation, but also encouraging a shared vulnerability. Every entrepreneur had their struggles. As they started to build their platform, Sarah's vision crystallized greater than before. She realized her strength didn't come from the absence of fear, but from the ambition to confront it head-on. Building the momentous call to action, Sarah set a timeline, inviting potential advisors to a launch meeting. But as the day neared, the tidal wave of anxiety crashed over her once again. The voice in her head whispered doubts as she prepared to present her vision. What if they didn't believe in her? As she closed her laptop that evening, determination flickered through her heart. Tomorrow held critical challenges, presenting her business plan, facing her potential advisors. Would those connections flourish, or would they crumble under the weight of her fears? The moment of accountability was at hand, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The morning of the launch meeting arrived with the sun rising decisively, illuminating Sarah's cluttered workspace. The air felt charged with expectation. As she sipped her coffee, the taste, often familiar, bore the weight of her escalating nerves. She had prepared meticulously, reviewing her notes and restructuring the business plan multiple times. Still, the gnawing voice of self-doubt lingered, demanding attention. "Just breathe," she muttered, closing her eyes briefly and visualizing the room where she would present. The advisors lined up in chairs, their expressions neutral, friendly, skeptical. It was a spectrum of possibilities. She shook her head, forcing the negative thoughts to dissipate. This was no longer just about her. It was a collaborative effort, a merging of strengths. Dressed in a tailored blazer that lent her an air of authority she didn't wholly feel, she glanced at the mirror. Encouragement surged from within. She was a force of creativity, a beacon for those who believed in entrepreneurship. Each run of her mind, retracing the conversations with Jess, stoked a flicker of confidence. These were not just names on her advisory board, they were allies accompanying her into this venture. As she drove to the meeting, the chatter of internal dialogues crescendoed. Would they acknowledge her vision? Would they be moved by the potential for change? These questions begged answers, turbulent yet tantalizing, each pulse echoing her drive. Arriving early, Sarah took a moment to gather herself in the conference room solitude. The glossy table reflected the bright overhead lights, and she paced slowly, running through her key points quietly, each repetition intentional, determined. Following a meticulous plan was essential, but leaving room for adaptability in her presentation felt equally critical. They would want to know not just what, but how. Her heart raced as she anticipated their queries. The door opened and the advisors filtered in, Jess leading the way, radiating confidence, followed by a few seasoned professionals. Sarah offered a tentative smile, hoping it masked the whirlpool inside. As everyone settled, she introduced herself, warmth in her tone, mindful of her inclination to sound clinical rather than personable. "Thank you for being here. I'm so eager to share my vision." She felt the shift in energy as she sent the slides up, projecting her detailed business plan onto the wall. Each slide mirrored her thoughts, the foundation of community, strategic partnerships, and ways to empower emerging entrepreneurs through mentorship and resources. Simplicity and clarity echoed through her words. Questions danced in the room as she transcended bullet points into engaging discussions, illuminating concerns and insights. Jess chimed in, backing up Sarah's points with her own expertise, and one by one, the advisor's skepticism began to wane. Yet, lurking in the corners of Sarah's mind was the shadow of impending critique. "What's your contingency plan if donations fall short?" one advisor pressed, eyebrow arched, skepticism evident. Taking a deep breath, Sarah embraced the challenge. "I believe in a resourceful approach, seeking not only funds, but building a sustainable model through workshops and skill-sharing initiatives. Our community will thrive through collaboration, creating a ripple effect," she explained. Firm with conviction. The meeting unfolded seamlessly, a mix of compromises and harmonization, resonating with collaborative energy that brought life to her vision. When she concluded, there was a moment of silence, tensions hanging palpably in the air. Her heart quickened, waiting for feedback that felt pivotal. Finally, Jess spoke up. I see tremendous potential here, and I believe with the right execution, we can truly create something impactful. I'm on board. Others nodded, their expressions shifting from hesitation to interest. Though the outcome was successful, Sarah felt a tumult of emotion surfacing, relief mingled with an inviting thrill of uncertainty. They had agreed to support her vision, yet stepping into the future ahead felt daunting. Could she sustain this momentum? Responsibility hung heavier, a future rooted in collective courage. After the meeting, Sarah caught a quiet moment with Jess. I didn't expect that kind of reaction, she admitted, vulnerability returning. What if I falter with these responsibilities? Jess met her gaze. You've shown remarkable growth, Sarah. Remember, leadership is about learning, and every experience will teach you something valuable. Don't retreat from this opportunity. As they spoke, a foundational shift occurred within Sarah. The fear still lingered, but a powerful realization tugged at her heart. Each step back from fear was a step toward empowerment. Just as she left the building, her phone buzzed. A text from Tim lit up the screen. I heard you crushed it today. What's next? With uncertainty and excitement mingling, Sarah composed a reply, her fingers hovering as she considered her next steps. Was it time to push further, to expand on what she had initiated and pursue additional connections? The weight of potential pressed down, but so too did the thrill of transformation. As she pondered her future moves, one thought resounded. The real challenge wasn't just about leading a project, but about leading herself through uncharted territories of trust and growth. What awaited in the next chapter of her journey? The thrill of potential loomed large, and her heart beat with possibility, beckoning her to take a bold step into the unknown. The next day arrived, and Sarah's mind buzzed with the aftermath of the meeting. While the thrill of support energized her, the weight of expectation surged equally. As the morning light streamed through her kitchen window, she realized how crucial these hours were for her mental clarity. Preparing breakfast felt like a ritual, each slice of fruit grounding her focus. Energy crackled within her. This was the beginning of something transformative. The notification bell on her phone interrupted her thoughts. A message from Jess. Let's meet to strategize our next steps. The simplicity of those words ignited a spark. She needed guidance, more than just affirmation of her ideas. Jess had a keen insight into navigating this business landscape, and Sarah understood that mentorship could be her anchor. At the cafe later, Sarah avoided the usual small talk. I want to know what comes next, she declared, a mixture of anxiety and determination. How do we sustain this momentum and translate it into real impact? Jess nodded thoughtfully, her gaze steady. First, we need to outline a long-term vision. Then, let's dive into how you can leverage your network without overextending yourself. Engagement is key, but sustainability is vital. Sarah listened intently, pondering how easy it had been for her, wrapped in her fears, to forget the importance of a well-structured plan. I understand that, but I've never been responsible for something this big. What if I can't handle the pressure? Embrace that uncertainty. It's a part of growth, Jess replied. Remember, it's not just about you anymore. You're building a foundation. The conversation evolved into a brainstorming session, each idea shared, critiqued, and reshaped, fueled by their shared vision. As they exchanged strategies, Sarah felt the weight of her self-doubt begin to dissolve, replaced by a growing confidence. She realized that collaboration was her strength. It wasn't a sign of weakness to rely on others. Once they wrapped up, Sarah left the cafe with newfound clarity. The rush of energy she felt was a testament to progress. Yet a nagging thought lurked. The naysayer inside whispered, "Will you truly deliver?" The next few days became a whirlwind of focus. Sarah immersed herself in research, reaching out to potential collaborators and refining her messaging. Each email she sent was a declaration of her commitment, a testament to her growth. The sharpness of her determination cut through doubt, transforming threats into opportunities. But soon, a formidable challenge emerged. One of the key advisors, a seasoned entrepreneur with a reputation for challenging newcomers, responded with skepticism. "Your idea has merit, but how will you ensure quality as you scale? Risks often accompany growth, and I worry you might be biting off more than you can chew." The challenge loomed before her like a storm cloud, heavy and burdensome. How could she counter someone seasoned enough to have likely seen countless fledgling entrepreneurs succeed and fail? Sarah felt her heart race, her mind whirling with counterarguments, ready to defend her vision. As she prepared for the call, she caught herself hesitating, evaluating her responses, and recoiling from potential confrontation. Deep down, the fear of rejection surfaced, X-raying the vulnerability she had fought so hard to suppress. But Jess's echo reminded her to stand tall, to embrace the intensity that came with leadership. Rallying her thoughts, Sarah decided to dial in with not only confidence but conviction. Instead of reacting defensively, she would embrace a collaborative spirit. What if we view this as an opportunity for structured feedback rather than just obstacles, she imagined saying. As the call began, she felt the familiar pulse of anxiety, but it was quickly overridden by her resolve. This was her moment to confront criticism head-on, to question and redefine her path instead of retreating in silence. "I appreciate your perspective, but I believe in a balanced approach. I'd love to hear your suggestions on how we can manage the scaling effectively." Each word ignited a shift within her. This was not merely her idea. It was a living organism, poised to grow, evolve, and adapt. As the conversation unfolded, she felt the tide of uncertainty receding, replaced by a sense of possibility. Later, retreating to her notebook, Sarah jotted down the insights gathered, each point a stepping stone toward growth, not just for her concept, but for herself. The joy of discovery bubbled inside her. She was carving out her niche, transforming feedback into a powerful toolkit for success. However, as she reflected on the steady climb ahead, a question bubbled. Was she truly ready to confront her biggest challenge yet? The line between confidence and arrogance felt precarious. Balancing ambition with humility would require vigilance. Tomorrow would bring new tests, new adversaries. Each decision bore a weight that could shift the trajectory of her journey forever. And as she closed her notebook, anticipation hung thick in the air. What unforeseen trials awaited? The moment for reckoning approached, but was she equipped to rise to the challenge? The next morning found Sarah enveloped in a veil of uncertainty. The sun filtered through her curtains, illuminating the room's scattered thoughts, ideas scribbled on sticky notes, half-filled notebooks, and an overwhelming stack of books on entrepreneurship. Dread mingled with excitement. Today would force her into unfamiliar territory once again. What if this wave of newfound confidence was merely a facade? She prepared breakfast with mechanical precision, each action grounding her as she mentally rehearsed the call she had scheduled with a potential investor who hadn't returned her messages until last night. His reputation preceded him, and she'd seen others walk away from meetings with him feeling defeated. Yet there she was, on the brink of transformation, leaning into the discomfort. "Deep breath," she whispered to herself as the coffee brewed. After sipping her first cup, she glanced at the time and rushed to log onto her laptop, her pulse quickening with every click of the keyboard. The video call began, and Sarah faced a polished figure, an older man with a discerning gaze that seemed to assess her with every word. "I have seen many entrepreneurs. It takes more than passion to succeed. What's your plan for scalability?" He leaned back, arms crossed, an intimidating presence. Instead of retreating into her shell, Sarah straightened her posture and met his gaze. I understand your concern. Scaling does carry risks, but I believe my adaptable approach can minimize those. The words flowed more smoothly than she had anticipated, yet doubt started creeping in, and she felt the weight of his skepticism palpable through the screen. He interrupted. Yes, but what are your specific benchmarks? Anyone can quote potential. I need numbers. The question hung like a heavy fog. Instead of crumbling under pressure, Sarah recalled Jess's counsel. Specifics bind potential to reality. For the first quarter, I project a 20% increase in engagement through targeted outreach, she stated, feeling the conviction build behind her voice. Simultaneously, developing partnerships to bolster credibility and ensure quality control. I'm not just hoping for success, I've defined the roadmap. The investor's brows furrowed, and for a moment, silence stretched uncomfortably between them. Panic threatened to anchor her, but she pressed on, aware that with each detail, she was not just answering his queries, but solidifying her self-assurance. However, he continued, his tone lightening slightly, if you diversify your approach even more, I may be more willing to engage. She seized the opening, interested but cautious. What aspects do you think I should explore further? Each suggestion he provided was not just feedback, it felt like a subtle invitation to deeper collaboration. Instead of feeling threatened, she regarded his insights as a compass steering her toward clarity. Clarity was power. Energized, Sarah wrapped up the call with her mind buzzing from newfound possibilities. As the image of the screen faded, doubt receded further into her mind, giving way to resilience. Discussions that remained unspoken, plans that went unmade, her growing arsenal of strategies multiplied. But soon a chill washed over her. Faced with the possibility of success, what if she stumbled? Would she remain able to adapt when provoked by new challenges? Reality hit hard. Moving forward might require sacrifices she had not yet contemplated. The idea of collaboration now seemed weighty. Could she forge those connections without losing her essence? As the sun dipped on the horizon, the once vibrant colors bled into dusk. Sarah, curled up in her favorite chair, scrawled down what the investor had suggested, alongside her counter-suggestions, knitting her potential future with every line. Yet, as she penned her thoughts, the doorbell rang, and with it came an unexpected visitor, potentially altering the course of her resolve. Standing up, she felt the flicker of 100 what-ifs swirling into a storm. Was she ready to face whatever awaited her on the other side? She opened the door, her heart racing. Who could it be, and how would they challenge or support her newfound journey? At the door stood Jess, her expression a mix of excitement and concern. I was in the area and thought I'd check on you. How's everything going after the meeting? Sarah felt a wave of warmth wash over her. The familiar presence of her friend anchored her amidst the chaotic whirlwind swirling in her mind. I had a call with a potential investor today, she disclosed, her voice carrying a blend of pride and anxiety. It went well, but the pressure is mounting. I have to execute now. Jess stepped inside, and they sank into plush chairs in the living room. Tell me everything, Sarah, she urged, her eyes attentive, encouraging Sarah to share the highlights and inner struggles. As Sarah recounted the call, she felt the weight of worry beginning to lift. Jess listened intently, her analytical mind already processing details as they exchanged thoughts. You have to find a way to channel this energy. You know your numbers, and you know your business. Now, it's about building those connections and following through. Inspired by Jess's relentless support, Sarah leaned back. You're right. I can't afford to handle this alone. It was an epiphany. The weight of independence, which she had clung to in the wake of her husband's passing, was now a chain that slowed her growth. Let's brainstorm some of those connections we discussed. With renewed determination, they launched into strategizing how to reach out to local businesses, entrepreneurs, and community leaders, aligning shared values and untapped opportunities. Sarah's fears transformed into ideas, morphing her uncertainty into tangible steps. With every name they added to the list of potential collaborators, her excitement surged. Sarah had begun to redefine herself, no longer just motivated by grief, but ignited by the prospect of creating a legacy that intertwined her late husband's vision with her newfound agency. Remember, it's not just about making connections, Jess reminded her. It's about nurturing them carefully. When you can, bring your story into these conversations. It's what makes you compelling. The realization resonated deeply. Her narrative was not an impediment, but an asset that could inspire others. As she sat across from Jess, laughter punctuating their discussions, Sarah felt the shadows of self-doubt dissipating. Each shared moment served as a commitment to transparency, trust, and resilience. Days turned into a flurry of activity as Sarah began to reach out. Each conversation honed her messaging. Each meeting acted as a reiteration of her purpose. The fear that had once gripped her heart morphed into a pulse of excitement. One afternoon, she found herself at her kitchen table, drafting an invitation to the network gathering she envisioned for fellow entrepreneurs. It encapsulated connection, not just reaching out to potential funders, but to those who craved collaboration. "Dear friends," she typed carefully, "I invite you to join me in creating a community that thrives through shared experiences and mutual support, where we reinvigorate our endeavors and inspire growth together." With Jess by her side, she began finalizing the arrangements for the event that would showcase the potential of their collaborative spirit. But just as she felt solid in her momentum, the familiar inkling of apprehension resurfaced. Would they connect with her vision or silently judge it? Would the fear of failure twist the optimism that was now ingrained in her actions? The day of the gathering dawned bright, a beautiful sense of anticipation hanging in the air. As she arrived at the venue, an inviting cafe adorned with local art, Sarah noticed the guests trickling in, sensing a communal pulse beginning to build. With each friendly face that arrived, her heart warmed. The room filled quickly, laughter intertwined with business jargon, a symphony of hopes mingling in a space that felt both intimate and expansive. As Sarah stood to address the attendees, she could feel the energy humming around her, and a voice she barely recognized came forth. "Thank you all for coming today. As we gather here, I want to share not just our ambitions, but a vision rooted in community, a dedication to growth that doesn't come easy," she announced, her voice steady and clear. "Together, we can forge connections that transcend our individual journeys, that empower each of us." After the introduction, conversations ignited throughout the room like sparks, branching out into the diverse corners of aspirations and dreams. As she moved among the attendees, stories flowed freely, creating threads that intertwined her vision with theirs. Days later, as Sarah sat reviewing notes from the event, she realized that each connection made had strengthened her resolve, adding layers to her own story. People began to approach her for collaboration, inspired by the authenticity she offered. With each passing week, she witnessed immense growth. The platform she envisioned blossomed and became a prominent fixture in her community. Invitations poured in to share her story, and partnerships developed organically from the seeds she had planted, none of which would have hesitated to confront her fears. Through these interactions, she discovered an inner reservoir of strength she had not known existed. No longer a grieving widow, but a recognized leader, capable and competent in her own right. In the months that followed, Sarah accomplished what had seemed insurmountable. She found her company's voice, structured her business plan to reflect a sustainable approach that married innovation with transparency, and renewed her self-worth each day through progress monitored both internally and externally. Standing before her colleagues at a networking conference several months later, she prepared to present her business's trajectory. Glancing back through the journey that had shaped her, she recognized how deeply transformative the experience had been, not merely for her career, but for herself as a vibrant force moving toward genuine success. Leadership is not devoid of fear, she articulated to the audience. It is rooted in vulnerability, which is incredibly powerful. Today, I stand here not just as an entrepreneur thriving against odds, but as a woman who discovered her unyielding strength through connection. The applause that echoed through the room filled her with affirmation, but even more significantly, validation. She had conquered her fears and emerged transformed. Embracing her journey meant finding purpose, resilience, and a deeper understanding of the value within vulnerability itself. As she stepped off the stage, she was met with a display of admiration. She was now a leader recognized not for the tragedy she had withstood, but for the future she was actively creating. Later that evening, reflecting on her evolution, Sarah felt the warmth of accomplishment and gratitude. The journey wasn't solely about rebuilding a business from the ashes of loss. It was also about reclaiming herself in a world where failure and triumph coexist, allowing her to become a testament to what one could achieve with perseverance, community, and a heart open to possibility. The last remnants of doubt were no longer shackles, but reminders of a victory earned. Sarah embraced this newfound clarity, proud of her transformation and the legacy she now nurtured, a legacy that promised to yield hope for others, just as it had for her. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion, because true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Don't wait even one more second.